All right, today we get to learn the quadratic formula and how to use it. Um, the quadratic formula, it's a very complex formula, but it comes from completing the square. Um, so if you had any quadratic equation like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and you started doing all the steps for completing the square, so you divided everything by a first, then you found half the b term and squared it, and you kept going through all the processes to get to complete the square with these variables, you would come up with the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is this. It says if ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 and a does not equal 0, then x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It's long, but a lot of times it comes to be easier than actually going ahead with completing the square. And I definitely think it's worth memorizing. And to do some memorization, I think it's worth going to a song. So I'm going to show you just a little clip of a song that I love that a couple teachers did to the Adele's Rolling in the Deep song. So I'll let you see a little bit of it, and then I would like you to work on that, and we'll go over it in class too.
Here I come walking, strutting down the hall. Don't
Okay, obviously some difficulties there, so we'll try to watch it in class. I'll just give you the little short version, just the actual part. So it's like negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So there's a little tune, helps memorizing a lot easier, and this is definitely worth memorizing. So I'll try to show you the whole thing in class next week or tomorrow, whenever we get to it. All right, let's move on. So let's use the quadratic formula to actually solve some problems. Okay, so one tip is that you always want to write your equation in standard form before you use the quadratic formula so it's set up right. So if I have an equation like this and I want to use the quadratic formula, I would probably add 3x to both sides to get one side equal to 0. And I'd set this up like x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Okay. And this would be a really easy equation to factor and solve, but for now let's just practice using the quadratic formula. So our quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So remember, when we have it, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we need to know what each part is. So when I'm setting up my quadratic formula, I'm going to go ahead and do x equals negative b, so negative 3 in this case, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is a 1, because there's no coefficient in front of that x, c, which is 2, all over 2 times a, which is 1 in this case. Okay, my tip, so you always want to do order of operations. I highly recommend solving this first. And you can use a calculator, but if it's easy like this, you don't have to. So 3 squared is 9, 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. So we're doing 9 minus 8 is 1, and the square root of 1, lo and behold, happens to be 1. So what I'm actually going to be solving here is negative 3 plus or minus 1 all over 2. So we're going to have our two answers, so we need to solve negative 3 plus 1 over 2 and negative 3 minus 1 over 2. So this equals negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1, and this equals negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. So our answer should be x equals negative 1 or negative 2. Okay, and if you had factored this, I'm sure you could have much more quickly gotten x plus 2 times x plus 1 equals 0 and still come up with negative 2 and negative 1. But unfortunately, not everything's factorable, so sometimes we need to use the quadratic formula. All right. Or completing the square, that always works. So solve 3x squared plus 4x minus 8 equals 0. I want you to write an exact answer and an answer with solutions rounded to the nearest hundredth. So I want you to solve using quadratic formula again. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. And so this is already in standard form, which is nice. So we're just going to set it up. So negative b will be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 8, okay, all over 2a, so 2 times 3. Okay, I want to show you a little tip on your calculator for solving this correctly, because a lot of my students in the past just have had trouble getting the right answer, and I think it's just a trouble with your calculator. So again, I highly recommend doing this part under the radical first and solving that. So it was 4 squared, I think, sorry, I'm going to have to look back at it, 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8. So you can definitely do this, just see what that's going to equal. So 4 squared minus 4 times 3, you can just hit times 3 is fine, times negative 8. If you just put it all in at once, that's, you know, these calculators will do order of operations. So that's 112. So what I want you to do is then you're going to write it like this. You'll write negative 4 plus or minus square root 112 over 6. And then we're going to solve these both ways. So we're going to do negative 4 plus root 112 over 6, and then negative 4 minus root 112 over 6. I would consider these exact answers, though you can simplify that by taking perfect squares that go into 112. We're not going to do that today. I'm just going to let you leave it like this for now. And then we'll go ahead, and this is my tip for doing this on your calculator. I would do negative 4 plus square root 112, and then you're going to have to hit enter because you want that whole thing, either that or put it in parentheses, divided by my denominator, which was 6. Okay, so my first answer is about 1.097. It says round to the nearest hundredth. So if it's about 1.097, I'm rounding here, it's going to be about 1.10. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing, negative 4 minus root 112 over 6. So negative 4 minus square root 112, 112, and then hit enter, and then divide by 6, about negative 2.43. So this is about negative 2.43. So I've got my exact answers here, my rounded answers here. So this is what x is approximately. Okay, so you should practice this on your calculator and make sure that you can come up with the right responses and that you're not messing up with the order of operations, etc. Okay, example 3. A child throws a ball upward with an initial velocity of 15 feet per second. Okay, that's the initial velocity. And they're standing at 2 feet. If no one catches the ball, how long will the ball be in the air? So I want you to think about, here's this child. They're throwing the ball, and the ball goes zoop and down to the ground, okay? And you're trying to see how long it will be in the air. So you're looking for a time, and you want to find when your height ends up getting to 0, okay? How long that's going to take. So we are going to plug in to the vertical motion formula all the values we know. So h equals negative 16t squared plus, instead of v, that's my initial velocity, it's going to be 15t plus c, which is my starting height, of 2. What's important to know is I care about how long it's going to be in the air, so I care about when it hits 0, when the height goes to 0. So I'm going to substitute 0 for h, and then since this is in standard form, I'm going to use the quadratic formula to solve it. So please use the quadratic formula to solve this on your own, and then just check with me and see if you're right. So I'm going to get negative 15 plus or minus the square root of 15 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 2 all over 2 times negative 16. Okay, so we're looking at that equation right there. Okay, so I solved under there. I got 353 under the radical, and then I solved my two equations, negative 15 plus root 353 all over negative 32. That was negative 0.12. And then I also did negative 15 minus root 353 over negative 32, and I got 1.06. So the question is, how long will it be in the air? So it would hit the ground back here if it had an infinite motion, negative 0.12 seconds ago, also hits the ground in 1.06 seconds. Remember, we really started at time 0, so this is going to be in the air for about 1.06 seconds if nobody catches the ball. All right, let's look at just a couple more things. So, a lot of times you want to pick just whatever method is the quickest. So I want you to look at these equations. I'm going to give you all of them at once. And I want you to think which method are you going to choose to solve the equations, and try to pick something that you think is smart. Okay? So I might look through, and because I think square roots is the easiest and then factoring, I would look to see if I can do those first. If I can't, I may want to come up with another method. So you check them out. Okay, when I look at that first one, I might try factoring it for a minute and just see if it seems easily factorable. So I'd check out like with 5 and 1, 7 and 2, or I'd try 2 and 7, and I might try 14 and 1, but I'm not really getting anywhere. So if I tried factoring for about 20 or 30 seconds and I didn't come up with it, I would probably choose to use the quadratic formula. And that would just be my personal choice, because factoring is great if it's quick, but if it's taking you too long, move on to another method. Okay, this one, it's a great, nice equation because it has no b terms. So definitely I would choose to use square roots in this case, because it would be pretty simple to add 169 to both sides and then divide by 25. So you're going to get x squared equals 169 over 25. And then you're going to be it's going to be easy for you to tell that x equals plus or minus 13/5. That would definitely be quicker than using the quadratic formula or another method. If I tried C again, it looks nice and simple, so I might try to factor it, but I think it's pretty obvious to tell there's no factors that multiply to 3 and add up to negative 5. So this probably is not going to have pretty solutions to factor. So again, I would probably resort to using the quadratic formula to solve it. This last one, x squared minus 10x plus 24 equals 0. I think this one's super easy to factor because two numbers that multiply to 24 that add to negative 10, well, negative 6 and negative 4. So I can do x minus 6 times x minus 4 equals 0. And then without a whole lot of work, I know that x equals 6 or x equals 4. So this one I would choose to solve by factoring. So what I want you to be able to look for is like, what's a nice quick method? Sometimes you might use graphing as well, or you might use completing the square if you thought it was pretty easy. Like C might not have been too bad for completing the square, but that would be a personal preference. Okay, so closure. What I want you to be able to do is, without your notes, be able to recite or sing the quadratic formula to your neighbor, your computer, whoever. And think about when it's useful to use the quadratic formula to solve the quadratic equation. When might that be helpful? And I will see you in class.